The wind shrieked like a demon across the Sierra Nevada foothills, and Diana Whitmore knew with terrible certainty that she was going to die alone in this God-forsaken blizzard if the cracking sounds beneath her wagon meant what she feared they did. It was December of 1867, and she had been foolish enough to believe she could make it from Sacramento to Santa Rosa, California, before the winter storms hit these mountain passes. Her father had warned her, begged her to wait until spring, but stubborn pride and desperation had driven her forward. The teaching position waiting for her in Santa Rosa would not hold indefinitely, and after losing her mother to fever that autumn, she needed to escape the suffocating memories that clung to every corner of their Sacramento home. So she had set out with her modest belongings, her father's old mare pulling the wagon, and enough supplies to see her through what should have been a 4-day journey along the trading routes. That was before the storm had swept down from the mountains with a fury that seemed almost personal. The temperature had plummeted so quickly that ice formed on her eyelashes, and the snow fell so thick and fast that she could barely see the mare's hindquarters from her seat. The trail had disappeared beneath a blanket of white, and she had been following what she hoped was the right direction for the past 2 hours, praying that she would not lead them both off a cliff or into a ravine. Then came the sound that stopped her heart, a sharp crack followed by a grinding shriek of wood against wood. The wagon lurched violently to the left, and Diana was thrown against the side rail hard enough to knock the breath from her lungs. The mare whinnied in panic, rearing against the traces, and Diana fought to control the reins with hands so numb she could barely feel the leather. "Whoa! Whoa there, Bessie!" she called, her voice nearly swallowed by the wind. She managed to calm the horse enough to bring the wagon to a shuddering halt, though it tilted at a sickening angle. Her stomach sank as she climbed down into the knee-deep snow and made her way around to inspect the damage. The rear left wheel had snapped, not just cracked or damaged, but broken clean through 3 of the spokes, and the iron rim had twisted away from the wooden frame. The wagon sagged drunkenly, the axle digging into the snow, and Diana felt the last of her hope drain away like water through cupped hands. She was alone on a mountain pass, in a blizzard with no shelter in sight, a broken wagon, and night falling fast. The cold was already seeping through her wool coat and multiple layers of skirts, and her fingers ached despite her gloves. Bessie stamped nervously, her breath forming great clouds of steam in the frigid air. Diana tried to think rationally through the panic that threatened to overwhelm her. She could not repair the wheel herself, even if she had possessed the tools and knowledge. She could not continue forward with the wagon in this condition. Unhitching Bessie and riding her might work, but the mare was a draft horse, not trained for riding, and in this storm, without the shelter of the wagon, Diana doubted she would last an hour before succumbing to the cold. She climbed back onto the tilted wagon seat and tried to construct some kind of windbreak using the canvas tarp that covered her belongings. Her movements were clumsy with cold and fear, and tears froze on her cheeks as she worked. This could not be how her story ended, frozen to death at 22 years old, because she had been too proud to listen to her father's wisdom. The wind screamed louder, and the snow fell harder, until Diana could see nothing beyond a few feet in any direction. The world had become a swirling white void, and she huddled in her inadequate shelter, pressing close to Bessie's bulk for warmth, and prayed for a miracle she did not deserve. She did not know how long she sat there, shivering and fighting to stay conscious, before she saw him. At first, she thought her mind was playing tricks on her, that hypothermia was setting in and causing hallucinations. Through the curtain of snow, a shape emerged, tall and broad-shouldered, leading a horse that looked as substantial as smoke in the whiteout conditions. The figure moved with purpose despite the storm, as though he could see through the blizzard with ease, and for a moment Diana truly believed she was seeing a ghost, some spirit of the mountains come to guide her soul to whatever lay beyond. Then he was beside the wagon, and she could see he was flesh and blood, though how any living man had found her in this storm seemed no less miraculous than if he had been a specter. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with a dark wool coat crusted with snow, and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his face. A thick scarf covered the lower half of his face, and ice clung to the fabric. "Madam," he called, his voice deep and rough, but carrying clearly despite the wind. "You hurt?" Diana tried to answer, but her teeth were chattering so violently she could barely form words. "W-wheel broke. I cannot move." He did not waste time with more questions. Instead, he moved to examine the broken wheel with swift efficiency, then returned to his horse, a large roan stallion that stood calmly despite the storm, and began pulling items from his saddlebags. Diana watched through the haze of cold and exhaustion as he worked, moving around the wagon with the confidence of a man who knew exactly what needed to be done. He produced tools that seemed impossible in this wilderness: a leather tool roll containing a hammer, nails, strips of metal, and rope. He worked in the storm as though it were nothing more than a mild inconvenience, and Diana found herself mesmerized by the sight of his capable hands as he assessed the damage and began the repair. "This is going to be temporary," he called up to her, "but it will hold long enough to get you to shelter. There is a line shack about 2 miles northeast of here. Can you hold on that long?" Yes, Diana managed, though she was not certain it was true. But she would cling to consciousness through sheer force of will if necessary, because this ghost-like stranger was offering her a chance at survival. She watched as he worked, and the skill and speed with which he accomplished the seemingly impossible task left her in awe. He reinforced the broken spokes with strips of metal, binding them with rope and securing everything with nails driven through pre-drilled holes to prevent further splitting. He worked the twisted rim back into place, using the hammer and what looked like a small pry bar to bend the iron, his movements economical and precise despite the brutal cold and wind. It took him perhaps 20 minutes, though it felt like both an eternity and mere seconds to Diana's frozen mind. When he finished, he gave the wheel an experimental spin, nodded with satisfaction, then moved to check Bessie's harness and traces. "She seems sound," he said, running his hands over the mare's legs and checking her hooves. "The wagon is going to pull uneven, but the wheel will hold if we take it slow. I am going to lead you to the line shack. Stay on the seat and keep the reins steady. Can you do that?" "Yes," Diana said, forcing strength into her voice she did not feel. "But who are you? How did you find me?" He paused, and even through the scarf in the brim of his hat, she could feel the weight of his gaze. "Name is Parker Garrett. As for how I found you, I was heading for the same shack when I heard your horse. Lucky for both of us, sound carries strange in storms like this." "I am Diana Whitmore," she said, "and I owe you my life, Mr. Garrett." "Save your thanks until we are both warm and dry," he replied. But there was something almost gentle in his gruff tone. "Now hold tight. This is going to be slow going." He was true to his word. He took Bessie's bridle and led the mare forward at a careful walk, his own horse following behind without need of guidance. The wagon lurched and groaned, the repaired wheel holding but protesting with every revolution. Diana gripped the seat rail with both hands and focused on staying conscious, on keeping her body upright, despite the cold that seemed to have invaded her very bones. Parker Garrett moved through the blizzard like he could see a path invisible to Diana's eyes. Perhaps he was following some landmark she could not perceive, or perhaps he possessed the kind of instinct that came from years of surviving in harsh country. Whatever guided him, he never hesitated, never paused to reconsider direction, and Diana found herself trusting him completely, despite knowing nothing about him beyond his name. True to his word, within what might have been 2 miles, though distance was impossible to judge in the whiteout, a dark shape emerged from the snow. It was a small wooden structure, barely more than a shed, but to Diana it looked like a palace. Parker led them directly to it, as though he had known its exact location down to the inch. He secured the horses under a lean, to attach to the side of the shack, out of the worst of the wind, and spread a blanket over both animals before helping Diana down from the wagon seat. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground, and only Parker's quick reflexes kept her from falling face first into the snow. He caught her around the waist, and even through the layers of clothing, she could feel the strength in his arms. "I have you," he said quietly. "Just a few more steps." He half carried her to the door, kicked it open, and brought her inside. The shack was dark and cold, but it was out of the wind, and that alone felt like a blessing. Parker set her down on what felt like a rough wooden bench. Then she heard him moving around in the darkness, the scrape of flint on steel, and then blessed light bloomed as he lit a lantern that must have been left in the cabin for exactly this purpose. The light revealed a simple space, one room, perhaps 12 feet square, with a small wood stove in one corner, a pair of narrow bunks against opposite walls, a rough table, and 2 chairs. Firewood was stacked neatly beside the stove, and Diana could have wept at the sight of it. Parker wasted no time. He moved to the stove, opened it, and began building a fire with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, flames were crackling and he had the door shut and the damper adjusted. Only then did he turn his attention to Diana, pulling off his gloves and unwinding the scarf from his face. Diana got her first clear look at him in the lamplight, and her breath caught for reasons that had nothing to do with the cold. He was perhaps 27 or 28, with a strong jaw shadowed with several days' worth of dark stubble. His eyes were a striking gray blue, like winter ice reflecting sky, and his dark hair was longer than was fashionable, curling slightly where it brushed his collar. His face was weathered by sun and wind, with fine lines at the corners of his eyes, but it was a good face, strong and honest, and Diana felt something flutter in her chest that she had no business feeling about a stranger, no matter how heroically he had appeared. "We need to get you warm," he said, his voice all business. "How are your hands and feet? Any numbness?" "Everything is numb," Diana admitted, her voice shaking. "I cannot feel my fingers or toes." His expression tightened. "We need to warm you up slowly. Too fast can cause more damage. Can you move your fingers and toes?" Diana tried and managed small movements. "Yes, a little. Good, that is good." He moved to one of the bunks and pulled off the blankets, which were thick wool and blessedly dry, then brought them to her. "We need to get you out of those wet clothes. Is there anyone else with you? Another woman?" "No, I am traveling alone." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or disapproval, but he masked it quickly. "I am going to step outside and see to the horses properly. You get out of anything wet and wrap yourself in these blankets. There should be some spare clothes in the chest by the far bunk. They will be too large, but they will be dry. Understand?" Diana nodded, and he slipped back out into the storm, closing the door firmly behind him. Her hands shook so badly it took her 3 tries to undo the buttons of her coat, and her frozen fingers fumbled uselessly at the laces of her boots. By the time she managed to peel off her outer layers, revealing undergarments that were damp with melted snow, she was nearly sobbing with frustration and exhaustion. She found the chest Parker had mentioned and pulled out what looked like spare work clothes, a rough cotton shirt, wool pants, and thick socks. They were ridiculously large on her frame, but they were dry and warm from being stored in the chest, and she pulled them on with shaking hands. Then she wrapped herself in the blankets and huddled near the stove, feeling the first painful prickles of returning circulation in her extremities. Parker returned carrying her bags from the wagon, snow swirling in behind him before he shut the door again. He set her belongings in the corner, then pulled off his own coat and hat, shaking snow from them before hanging them on pegs by the door. "The horses are as comfortable as they can be," he reported. "They have feed, and I rigged up some extra windbreak with the tarp from your wagon. They should be fine until the storm passes." "When will that be?" Diana asked. He glanced toward the door as though he could see through it to read the weather. "Hard to say. Could be hours, could be days. These mountain storms are unpredictable." Diana felt a flutter of something that might have been panic or might have been something else entirely at the thought of being trapped in this tiny cabin with this stranger for days. But he had saved her life, she reminded herself. He had appeared like a miracle and fixed her wagon in impossible conditions, then led her to safety. She had no reason to fear him. Parker seemed to sense her discomfort. "I will sleep on the floor," he said quietly. "You take one of the bunks. You are safe here, Miss Whitmore. I give you my word." "It is Mrs. Whitmore," Diana said automatically, then felt her cheeks heat. "That is, it was meant to be. I was engaged, but he died last spring. I never married, so I suppose Miss is correct. But I am not some young girl. I am 22. She did not know why she was babbling, except that the warmth was returning to her body, and with it a strange giddiness that came from having survived certain death. Parker's expression softened slightly. "I am sorry for your loss," he said, and he sounded like he meant it. "And I did not mean to imply you were a child, but you are a respectable woman, and I want you to know you are safe in my company." "I know," Diana said, and realized she meant it. "You saved my life, Mr. Garrett. I trust you." Something shifted in his eyes at those words, some emotion she could not quite name, but he only nodded and turned to rummage through the cabin's supplies. He found a tin of coffee, a pot, and some hardtack, along with a few other preserved foods that had been left for exactly this kind of emergency. "It is not much, but it will keep us fed until the storm passes," he said. "Are you hungry?" Now that Diana was warming up, she realized she was ravenous. She had not eaten since early morning, too anxious about the threatening weather to stop for a proper meal. Yes, very. Parker set about preparing a simple meal with the same quiet efficiency he had shown in everything else. He heated water for coffee, soaked the hardtack in hot water to make it edible, and opened a tin of beans that he warmed on top of the stove. It was the simplest food Diana had ever eaten, but it tasted like a feast after the cold and fear. They ate in silence at first, Diana wrapped in her blankets on the bench, Parker sitting on one of the chairs he had pulled close to the stove. The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters and finding every crack in the walls, but inside the small space was growing warm, and Diana felt life returning to her body. "What were you doing out in this storm?" she finally asked. "You said you were heading for this shack?" Parker nodded, cradling his tin cup of coffee in both hands. "I have been working at a ranch about 15 miles east of here, up in the high country, winter work mostly, but the owner gave me leave to head down to Santa Rosa for the holidays. I planned to make it to the way station before the storm hit, but I misjudged the timing." "Santa Rosa?" Diana sat up straighter. "That is where I'm going. I have a position there, teaching at the schoolhouse. I was supposed to start after the new year." "That is a long way to travel alone," Parker said, and this time she heard the disapproval clearly in his tone. "Especially this time of year?" Diana felt her spine stiffen. "I am capable of taking care of myself. Or, I would have been, if not for the storm." "Capable is not the same as safe," Parker replied. "You could have died out there." "But I did not. Because you found me." Diana met his eyes steadily. "And I will thank you not to lecture me about proper behavior, Mr. Garrett. I have had quite enough of that from my father." Something that might have been amusement flickered in Parker's eyes. "My apologies, Miss Whitmore. I did not mean to presume. It is just that I have seen too many people come to grief in these mountains because they underestimated the danger." Diana's anger deflated as quickly as it had risen. He was right, after all. She had been foolish and reckless, and only his fortuitous appearance had saved her from the consequences of her pride. "No, I am sorry. You are correct. I should have waited or hired a guide or done any number of sensible things. But I was so eager to leave Sacramento, to start this new chapter of my life, that I let impatience override good judgment." Parker studied her for a long moment, and Diana had the uncomfortable feeling that he saw far more than she had intended to reveal. "Sometimes starting over requires a bit of recklessness," he said quietly. "I understand that." "Do you?" Diana asked. "Are you starting over, Mr. Garrett?" "In a way." He took a sip of his coffee, his gaze distant. "I spent the last few years working various jobs up and down California, never staying anywhere too long. But I am getting tired of drifting. Thought maybe Santa Rosa might be a place to put down roots. I have a little money saved, enough to start something of my own if I am careful." "What kind of something?" Diana asked, surprised by how much she wanted to know more about this mysterious man who had appeared out of the storm. "Horse breeding, maybe, training. I am good with horses, and there is always demand for quality animals. Or maybe a small ranch, if I can find decent land at a price I can afford." He shrugged. "Or maybe I will just end up working for someone else again. Hard to say." "You should follow your dreams," Diana said. "Life is too short to settle for less than what you want." "Is that why you took a teaching position in a town where you know no one?" Parker asked, but his tone was curious rather than judgmental. Diana considered how much to tell him, then decided that honesty felt right. They were trapped in this cabin together, possibly for days, and there seemed little point in maintaining polite fictions. "My fiancé died of cholera last spring. We were to be married in June. Then my mother took fever in October and passed within a week. My father is a good man, but the house felt like a tomb, full of ghosts and might-have-beens. When I saw the advertisement for a teaching position in Santa Rosa, it felt like a sign, a chance to go somewhere new, where no one knew me as the poor girl who lost her fiancé, the poor daughter who lost her mother, a place where I could be just Diana, on my own terms." Parker's eyes softened with understanding. "I am truly sorry. Those are heavy losses to bear." "Thank you." Diana surprised herself by feeling tears prick at her eyes. She had not spoken this openly about her grief to anyone, not even her father, but something about Parker's steady presence, his lack of pity or excessive sympathy, made it easy to be honest. "The teaching position is a good one, and I am qualified. I studied at the normal school in San Jose, and I have always loved working with children. It feels like the right choice, even if the journey here has been rather more eventful than I anticipated. A smile tugged at the corner of Parker's mouth, transforming his serious face into something warmer and more approachable. I would say that nearly freezing to death qualifies as eventful. Diana found herself smiling back, despite everything. When you put it that way, I suppose I can count myself fortunate that my most exciting story to tell my students will be about the mysterious cowboy who appeared in a blizzard to save my life. I am not sure I qualify as mysterious, Parker said, or particularly interesting, for that matter, just a man trying to make his way in the world. You appeared out of nowhere in a storm that should have made travel impossible, repaired my wagon with tools and skill that seemed almost magical, then led me to this cabin as though you could see through the snow, Diana countered. If that is not mysterious and interesting, I do not know what is. Parker shifted uncomfortably, as though praise made him uneasy. I was fortunate to hear your horse, and I know these mountains fairly well. I have worked in this area before, so I knew the line shack was here. As for the tools, any man who works with his hands learns to carry the basics. Nothing magical about any of it. Perhaps not to you, Diana said softly. But to me, it was a miracle. Their eyes met and held, and Diana felt something pass between them, some connection she could not quite name. The firelight played across Parker's features, casting shadows that emphasized the strength of his jaw and the intensity of his gaze, and Diana found herself wondering what it would be like to be looked at by this man every day, to have his steady presence and quiet strength as part of her life. The thought startled her so much that she looked away, feeling heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. She should not be thinking such things about a man she had just met, a stranger whose life was heading in the same direction as hers, only by chance. And yet, she could not deny the pull she felt toward him, the way her heart seemed to beat faster when he looked at her. Parker stood abruptly, as though he too had felt the weight of that moment and needed to break it. You should try to get some rest. It has been a hard day, and you need to recover your strength. Diana wanted to protest that she was not tired, but even as the thought formed, a yawn escaped her. The warmth, the food, and the aftermath of fear and cold were catching up with her, and she realized she was exhausted down to her bones. Perhaps you are right, she admitted, but what about you? I will keep the fire going and make sure everything stays secure. I will sleep later. He moved to one of the bunks and arranged the remaining blankets into a makeshift bed on the floor beside it. This bunk is yours. I will be right here if you need anything. Diana rose on unsteady legs and made her way to the bunk, still wrapped in her blankets. The mattress was thin, and the frame creaked, but it felt like luxury after the tilted wagon seat and the bone-deep cold. She settled under the covers, and Parker moved to dim the lantern until only a faint glow remained. "Mr. Garrett?" she called softly into the darkness. "Yes, Miss Whitmore? Thank you for everything." A pause, and then his voice came, rough and warm. "You are welcome. Sleep well." Diana closed her eyes and listened to the storm raging outside, the wind howling like wolves and the snow hissing against the windows. But inside the cabin, she felt safe and warm, and her last thought before sleep claimed her was of steady gray-blue eyes and capable hands that had pulled her back from the edge of death. She woke to pale sunlight filtering through the gaps in the shutters and the smell of coffee brewing. For a moment she was disoriented, unable to remember where she was or why she was wearing rough wool pants that were far too large. Then memory flooded back. The storm, the broken wheel, and Parker Garrett appearing like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to form. Diana sat up and saw Parker at the stove, tending the fire and the coffee pot. He had his back to her, and she took a moment to study him in the morning light. He moved with an easy grace despite his size, and there was something comforting about the way he went about the simple tasks of making coffee and checking the stove, as though he were perfectly content with the quiet routine. "Good morning," she said, her voice still rough with sleep. He turned and smiled, and Diana's breath caught at how the expression softened his features. "Morning. How are you feeling?" "Much better." Diana swung her legs over the side of the bunk and tested her feet on the cold floor. Her toes and fingers still ached slightly, but the terrible numbness was gone. "Thanks to you." "The storm passed during the night," Parker reported, gesturing toward the windows. "We should be able to head out once you have had breakfast and we have checked the horses." Diana felt an unexpected pang of disappointment at the thought of leaving the cabin, which made no sense at all. She should be eager to continue her journey, to reach Santa Rosa and begin her new life. Yet the thought of parting ways with Parker Garrett left her feeling hollow. "How far is it to Santa Rosa from here?" she asked. "About 2 days' travel, depending on how the roads are after the storm. There is a way station about 8 miles northwest where we can stop tonight, then another half day to reach town." He poured coffee into 2 cups and brought one to her. "Assuming your wagon wheel holds, I did my best with it, but that repair is not meant to last forever." "I am sure it will hold," Diana said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "You seem to be good at everything you do." Parker shook his head. "Not everything, but I have had plenty of practice at making do with what is available." They shared a simple breakfast of more hardtack and some dried beef Parker had in his saddlebags, then bundled up to face the cold. Outside, the world had been transformed into a wonderland of white, the snow piled in deep drifts and sparkling under the clear blue sky. The storm had left behind perfect calm, and Diana could hardly believe this serene landscape was the same place that had been trying to kill her just hours before. The horses were cold but healthy, stamping and snorting in the morning air. Parker checked them both thoroughly, then examined the wagon wheel again. It held through the night, which is a good sign, but we should take it slow and easy. They set out shortly after, with Diana driving the wagon and Parker riding alongside on his roan stallion. The going was slow, as the snow was deep and the trail barely visible, but Parker seemed to know the way by instinct, and Bessie followed his horse without hesitation. As they traveled, Diana found herself talking to Parker in a way she had not talked to anyone in months. Perhaps it was the isolation, or the aftermath of near death, or simply the fact that he was easy to talk to, but she found herself sharing stories about her life in Sacramento, her work at the normal school, her hopes and fears about teaching in Santa Rosa. Parker, in turn, told her about his wandering years, working ranches from San Diego to the Oregon border, learning everything there was to know about horses and cattle, and surviving in harsh country. He spoke of the beauty he had seen in California's diverse landscapes, and the hard lessons he had learned about which men to trust and which to avoid. "Why Santa Rosa?" Diana asked as they paused to rest the horses at midday. "Of all the places you have been, why decide to settle there?" Parker gazed out at the snow-covered landscape, considering. "I passed through there last spring, working a cattle drive. It seemed like a good town, not too big, not too small, close enough to San Francisco for trade, but far enough away to maintain its own character. Good land for horses, mild climate most of the year. And I guess I liked the feel of it. Sometimes you just know when a place might be home." "I hope I feel that way about it," Diana said wistfully. "Right now, it still feels like I am running away, rather than running towards something." "Nothing wrong with running away, as long as you are running towards something better," Parker said. "And from what you have told me about your teaching position, it sounds like a good opportunity. The children in Santa Rosa are lucky to be getting you." Diana felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "That is kind of you to say." "It is not kindness, just truth. You are educated, passionate about teaching, and brave enough to travel across California alone to pursue your goals. Those are not common qualities." "Brave or foolish," Diana said ruefully. "I am not sure there is much difference." "There is a difference," Parker said firmly. "Foolish would have been giving up when the wheel broke. Brave is what you did, trying to survive, not panicking. You would have made it even without my help, I think. You would have found a way." Diana wanted to believe that, but she was not certain it was true. Still, it meant something that he thought so, that he saw strength in her, rather than just a woman in need of rescue. They reached the way station as the sun was setting, a larger structure than the line shack, with a proper stable and multiple rooms for travelers. The man who ran it, a weathered old-timer named George, was surprised to see travelers after the storm, but welcomed them warmly. "Heard it was a bad one up in the passes," he said, showing them to separate rooms. "You two are lucky you found shelter." "Very lucky," Diana agreed, her eyes meeting Parker's across the common room. That night, they shared dinner with George and 2 other travelers who had been stranded by the storm, and Diana found herself watching Parker as he talked with the men, his manner easy and friendly. He had a way of putting people at ease, she noticed, of listening more than he spoke, and when he did speak, his words carried weight. She retired to her room earlier than the men, but she lay awake for a long time, thinking about the cowboy who had saved her life. In 2 days, they would reach Santa Rosa, and then what? Would he simply disappear into his own life, pursuing whatever dreams had brought him west? The thought left her feeling bereft in a way she had no right to feel. She had known him for barely a day. She had no claim on him, no reason to expect that the connection she felt was anything more than gratitude mixed with the heightened emotions that came from surviving danger together. Yet, she could not deny that something had shifted in her heart, that when she thought about her future in Santa Rosa, she found herself imagining Parker in it. The next morning dawned clear and cold, and they set out early for the final leg of the journey. The roads were better here, lower in elevation and more traveled, and they made good time. Parker rode beside the wagon, and they talked of everything and nothing, the conversation flowing as easily as it had the day before. As the day wore on and they drew closer to Santa Rosa, Diana felt a growing sense of urgency, as though time were slipping through her fingers like sand. She wanted to ask Parker if she would see him again, if he would call on her once they were both settled in town, but the words stuck in her throat. What if he said no? What if this connection she felt was entirely one-sided? They crested a final hill as the sun was beginning to set, and there below them lay Santa Rosa, a thriving town nestled in a valley, smoke rising from dozens of chimneys, and the streets laid out in neat grids. It looked welcoming and prosperous, a place that could become home, and Diana felt a flutter of excitement mixed with her anxiety. "There it is," Parker said quietly. "Santa Rosa." "Yes," Diana replied, but she was not looking at the town. She was looking at him. They descended into town as darkness fell, and Parker led her through the streets to the address she had been given for her lodgings. It was a respectable boarding house on a quiet street, run by a widow named Mrs. Eleanor Cassidy, who had been described in her correspondence as a kind but proper woman. Parker helped Diana unload her belongings, carrying them up to the porch while she knocked. Mrs. Cassidy answered, a plump woman in her 50s with sharp eyes that took in Diana's disheveled appearance and the tall cowboy with her bags. "Miss Whitmore, I presume?" she said. "We had begun to worry when you did not arrive as expected." "I am sorry to have caused concern," Diana said. "I was caught in the storm in the mountain pass. If not for Mr. Garrett, I would not have survived. He rescued me and guided me safely here." Mrs. Cassidy's expression softened. "Well then, Mr. Garrett, you have our profound thanks. Please, won't you come in and warm yourself? It is the least we can offer." "Thank you, madam, but I should see to my horse and find lodging of my own," Parker said. He set down Diana's bags and turned to her, his hat in his hands. "Miss Whitmore, it has been an honor traveling with you. I hope Santa Rosa is everything you want it to be." Diana's heart clenched. This could not be goodbye, not like this, not when there was so much left unsaid between them. "Mr. Garrett, I cannot simply let you walk away after all you have done. Please, will you at least call on me tomorrow? I would like to properly thank you, and I would like to know that you are settled and well." Something flickered in Parker's eyes, hope, perhaps, or relief. "I would like that, Miss Whitmore, very much." "Tomorrow afternoon, then," Diana said. "Will you remember the address?" "I will remember," Parker said, and the way he looked at her made Diana's breath catch. "Until tomorrow." He mounted his horse and rode away into the darkness, and Diana stood on the porch watching until he disappeared around a corner. Only then did she turn to find Mrs. Cassidy watching her with knowing eyes. "He seems like a good man," the widow said gently. "He is," Diana replied. "The very best." Mrs. Cassidy showed Diana to a comfortable room on the second floor, helped her settle in, and provided a hot bath and a warm meal. Diana fell into bed exhausted but found sleep elusive. Her mind kept returning to Parker, wondering where he was staying, if he was warm and comfortable, if he was thinking of her the way she was thinking of him. The next morning, Mrs. Cassidy introduced Diana to the other boarders at breakfast, a mix of working men and single women, all respectable and friendly. They welcomed Diana warmly and asked about her journey, and Diana found herself telling a carefully edited version of her adventure, one that emphasized Parker's heroism and downplayed the true danger she had been in. After breakfast, Mrs. Cassidy walked with Diana to the schoolhouse, a neat white building on the edge of town with a bell tower and large windows. The school board chairman, a portly man named Mr. Edmund Harris, met them there and showed Diana around. "We are very pleased to have you, Miss Whitmore," he said. Your credentials are excellent, and we have high hopes for the education of our children under your guidance. School resumes after the new year, which gives you 2 weeks to prepare and settle in." Diana toured the schoolroom, taking in the rows of desks, the blackboard, the books stacked neatly on shelves. It was everything she had hoped for, a fresh start and meaningful work. Yet, as she stood there, she found herself wondering if Parker would like it, if he would be proud of what she was accomplishing. The thought surprised her. She had never been the sort of woman who needed a man's approval or validation. She had always been independent, capable, determined to make her own way. Yet somehow, in the space of 2 days, Parker Garrett had become important to her in a way she could not quite explain. She spent the rest of the morning settling into her room and preparing for Parker's visit, changing her dress 3 times before settling on a simple blue wool that brought out her eyes. She told herself she was being ridiculous, that this was just a courtesy call to thank a man who had helped her. But her racing heart knew better. Parker arrived promptly at 2 in the afternoon, looking freshly shaved and wearing clean clothes, his hat in his hands. Mrs. Cassidy showed him into the parlor, where Diana waited, and the widow made a great show of leaving the door open for propriety, while giving them enough privacy to speak freely. "Miss Whitmore," Parker said, and the way he said her name made her shiver. "You look well rested." "As do you," Diana replied. "Did you find suitable lodging?" "I did. There is a boarding house for working men on the other side of town. Nothing fancy but clean and comfortable. And I have been making inquiries about work and land." His eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "There is a small ranch about 5 miles outside of town that is for sale. The owner passed away, and his widow is moving back east to live with her daughter. It is only 40 acres, but the price is reasonable, and the land is good for horses. I am going to look at it tomorrow." Diana felt excitement bubble up in her chest. "Parker, that sounds wonderful. Are you really going to stay, put down roots here?" "I am thinking seriously about it," he said. "I have enough saved for a down payment, and if I can get work while I build up the ranch, I think I can make it work. It feels right. You know, like this might be where I am meant to be." "I am so glad," Diana said, and meant it with her whole heart. The thought that Parker would be here, in Santa Rosa, building a life just as she was, made the future seem suddenly bright and full of possibility. They talked for over an hour, the conversation flowing easily as always, and Diana found herself laughing more than she had in months. Parker had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard, and he seemed genuinely interested in everything she said, asking thoughtful questions about her teaching plans and her impressions of the town. Finally, as the afternoon light began to fade, Parker rose reluctantly. "I should go. I do not want to overstay my welcome or compromise your reputation." Diana stood as well, not wanting him to leave, but knowing he was right. "Will I see you again? Before you make your decision about the ranch?" "Would you like to?" Parker asked, and there was something vulnerable in his expression, as though her answer truly mattered to him. "Yes," Diana said simply. "Very much." Parker smiled, and Diana's heart skipped. "Then I will call on you again. Perhaps the day after tomorrow? I should know by then if the ranch is going to work out." "I will look forward to it," Diana said. He took her hand, his touch gentle despite his calloused palms, and bowed slightly over it in a gesture that was almost courtly. "Until then, Miss Whitmore." Diana watched him go, her hand tingling where he had touched it, and she felt something settle in her chest, a certainty that defied logic or reason. She barely knew this man, had spent only a few days in his company, yet she knew with bone-deep conviction that Parker Garrett was going to be important to her, perhaps the most important person in her life. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Diana met with the school board again, reviewed the curriculum, and began planning her lessons. She explored Santa Rosa, familiarizing herself with the shops and streets, and found it to be everything she had hoped. A welcoming community with all the advantages of a growing town, but still small enough to feel friendly and safe. But through it all, her thoughts kept returning to Parker. She wondered how his visit to the ranch was going, if he was going to make the purchase, if he was thinking of her as she was thinking of him. When he arrived at the boarding house on the appointed afternoon, Diana could tell immediately from his expression that he had good news. His eyes were bright with excitement, and there was an energy to his movements that spoke of barely contained joy. "I bought it," he said, as soon as Mrs. Cassidy had shown him into the parlor. "The ranch. The widow accepted my offer, and we signed the papers this morning. 40 acres, a small house that needs some work, a barn and corral in decent condition. It is mine." Diana's face split in a wide smile. "Parker, that is wonderful. Congratulations. Tell me everything." They sat together on the sofa, closer than was strictly proper, and Parker described the property in detail. The rolling pastures, the creek that ran through the southern boundary, the views of the surrounding hills. His enthusiasm was infectious, and Diana found herself envisioning the place as he described it, imagining the horses he would raise and train there. "I am going to need to hire some help eventually," Parker said. "But for now, I can manage on my own. I have been thinking about what breeds to focus on, and I think there is a market for good working horses, sturdy but smart, the kind that ranchers and farmers need, and maybe some riding horses for the ladies in town, well-mannered and pretty." "It sounds like you have thought this through carefully," Diana said. "I have had a lot of time to think over the years," Parker replied. "I always knew what I wanted. I just had to wait until I found the right place and had saved enough to make it happen. Santa Rosa feels right. This ranch feels right." He paused, then added softly, "And meeting you feels right." Diana's breath caught. "Parker, I know it has only been a few days," he said quickly, "and I know I have no right to say this when you were just starting to build your own life here. But I cannot stop thinking about you, Diana. From the moment I found you in that storm, something changed for me. I did not just save your life that day. You saved mine too, in a way. You reminded me that there is more to life than just surviving and drifting from place to place. You made me want to build something real, something lasting." Diana felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were good tears, joyful tears. "I feel the same way. I kept telling myself I was being foolish, that you could not possibly mean as much to me as you seem to in such a short time. But the truth is, I cannot imagine my life in Santa Rosa without you in it. When I think about my future, you are there." Parker reached out and took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "Then, perhaps, we can build our futures together. I am not asking you to give up your teaching or your independence. I would never ask that. But I am asking if you will let me court you properly, to see where this connection between us might lead." "Yes," Diana said without hesitation. "Yes, Parker, I would like that very much." He smiled, and Diana thought she had never seen anything more beautiful than the joy in his eyes. "I will do this right. I will court you the way you deserve, with respect and patience. I will prove to you that I can be the kind of man worthy of someone like you." "You already are," Diana said softly. "You already have proven it." Over the following weeks, true to his word, Parker courted Diana with a patience and tenderness that made her fall deeper in love with him every day. He called on her regularly, always properly chaperoned by Mrs. Cassidy or one of the other boarders, bringing her small gifts, wildflowers he had picked on his new property, a book he thought she might enjoy, a beautiful stone he had found by the creek. They took walks through town, attended church services together, and went to community gatherings where they slowly became known as a couple. Diana met Parker's friends, the men he hired to help with the ranch work, and she could see the respect they had for him. Parker, in turn, came to the school several times to help with repairs and improvements, and Diana's students adored him, drawn to his quiet strength and gentle manner. When school began in January, Diana threw herself into teaching with all the passion and energy she possessed. She loved her students, ranging in age from 6 to 14, and she found deep satisfaction in watching them learn and grow. Parker would sometimes stop by after school to walk her home, and he would listen with genuine interest as she told him about her day, celebrating her triumphs and offering comfort when she faced challenges. In February, Parker invited Diana to visit the ranch for the first time, with Mrs. Cassidy accompanying them as chaperone. Diana fell in love with the place immediately. The modest house with its wide porch, the sturdy barn, the corrals where Parker's first horses grazed. He had been working hard, and it showed in every improved fence, every repaired board, every sign of careful stewardship. "It is wonderful," Diana said, standing on the porch and looking out over the property. "You should be so proud of what you are building here." "I am," Parker said, moving to stand beside her, "but it feels incomplete, like something is missing." Diana looked up at him, her heart beating faster. "What is missing?" Parker turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Mrs. Cassidy had tactfully retreated to the wagon, giving them a moment of relative privacy. You are, Diana. You are what is missing. I love you. I have loved you since that moment in the storm when you looked at me with such trust and courage. I love your intelligence, your passion, your kind heart, and your fierce independence. I love the way you laugh, the way you talk about your students, the way you see the good in people. I love everything about you. Tears streamed down Diana's face, but she was smiling. I love you too, Parker. I think I have loved you from the moment you appeared out of that blizzard like a miracle made flesh. You are the best man I have ever known, and I cannot imagine my life without you. Parker cupped her face gently, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. Then marry me, Diana. Be my wife. Build this life with me. We will make this ranch a home, raise our children here if you want them, grow old together, watching the seasons change. I promise I will spend every day trying to make you as happy as you have made me. Yes, Diana whispered. Yes, Parker, I will marry you. Nothing would make me happier. Parker leaned down and kissed her, a gentle, reverent kiss that promised a lifetime of love and devotion. Diana's arms came up around his neck, and she kissed him back with all the love in her heart, tasting salt from her tears and feeling like her chest might burst from the sheer joy of this moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Parker rested his forehead against hers. I will talk to your father, ask his permission properly, and we can have as long an engagement as you want. I know you need to finish the school year, and I want to do this right. My father will approve, Diana said confidently, especially when I tell him how you saved my life. And as for the engagement, I do not need a long one. I know what I want, and that is you. We could marry in the spring when school lets out for the summer. That would give us time to prepare. Spring, Parker repeated, smiling. I like that. New beginnings. They spent the rest of the day at the ranch, making plans and dreaming aloud about their future. Mrs. Cassidy beamed at them with maternal satisfaction, clearly having expected this outcome all along. True to his word, Parker wrote to Diana's father, and the response came back quickly and warmly approving. Diana's father was relieved that his daughter had found happiness again, and grateful to the man who had saved her life. He promised to come to Santa Rosa for the wedding, bringing with him Diana's few remaining family members. The months until the wedding passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Diana continued teaching, and Parker continued building his ranch and his horse breeding business. They spent every moment they could together, learning each other's rhythms and habits, sharing their hopes and fears, building the foundation of a strong marriage. The women of Santa Rosa embraced Diana warmly, helping her prepare for the wedding and welcoming her fully into the community. Mrs. Cassidy took particular pride in the match, telling anyone who would listen that she had known from the first night they were meant for each other. Parker's ranch began to thrive. His skill with horses became well known, and he soon had more business than he could handle, training mounts for local ranchers and breeding quality stock that commanded good prices. He hired a young man named Samuel to help with the daily work, giving him more time to spend with Diana. They were married on a perfect May afternoon in 1868 in the small church in Santa Rosa with half the town in attendance. Diana wore a simple but beautiful gown of cream silk, and Parker wore his best suit, looking handsome enough to make her heart race. Her father gave her away with tears in his eyes, and when Parker slipped the ring on her finger and spoke his vows in that deep, steady voice, Diana felt like the luckiest woman in the world. The reception was held at the ranch, which Diana could now officially call home. Long tables had been set up in the yard, and the entire community came to celebrate, bringing food and gifts and good wishes. There was music and dancing, and Diana danced with Parker under the stars, his arms strong around her, his eyes full of love. That night, after the guests had gone and they were finally alone in the house that was now theirs, Parker carried Diana over the threshold, both of them laughing. He set her down gently in the bedroom he had prepared with such care, and they came together with a tenderness and passion that took Diana's breath away. She had been with no man before, and Parker was gentle and patient, making sure she felt safe and cherished as they learned each other's bodies and shared the ultimate intimacy. Afterwards, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Diana felt a peace and contentment she had never known. Happy? Parker murmured, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. So happy I could burst, Diana replied. I love you, Parker Garrett. "I love you too, Diana Garrett," he said, and Diana smiled at the sound of her new name. The first year of their marriage was a time of adjustment and joy. Diana finished out the school year, then took a break over the summer to focus on making the ranch house truly a home. She painted walls, hung curtains, planted a garden, and added her personal touches to every room. When the new school year began, she returned to teaching, finding a good rhythm between her work and her life at the ranch. Parker's business continued to grow, and he became known throughout the region for his honest dealings and quality horses. He loved the work, and Diana loved watching him with the animals, seeing the patience and skill he brought to every interaction. They faced challenges, as all couples do. There were hard winters and dry summers, sick animals and financial worries, disagreements and misunderstandings. But they faced everything together, with honest communication and mutual respect, and each challenge they overcame made their bond stronger. In the spring of 1869, Diana discovered she was pregnant. She told Parker on a warm April evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set, and the joy on his face was something she would treasure forever. "A baby," he said wonderingly, placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Diana asked, though she could see the answer in his eyes. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Parker said. "Grateful, blessed, terrified, excited, all of those things at once. Thank you, Diana. Thank you for this gift." The pregnancy was not easy. Diana suffered from terrible morning sickness in the early months, and by the end, she was large and uncomfortable. But Parker was attentive and tender, doing everything he could to make her comfortable. He insisted she stop teaching 2 months before the baby was due, hiring a temporary replacement teacher, and ignoring her protests that she was perfectly capable of continuing. Their son was born on a cold November night, arriving 3 weeks early, and causing them both hours of anxiety as the labor progressed. But in the end, he was healthy and strong, with a lusty cry that announced his arrival to the world. They named him Peter William, after both of their fathers, and Parker held his son with shaking hands and tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," Parker whispered, staring at the tiny face. "Diana, he is perfect." "He has your eyes," Diana said softly, exhausted but happy. "And I think your chin." Peter was indeed perfect, at least in his parents' eyes. He was a good baby, quick to smile and easy to comfort, and both Parker and Diana fell completely in love with him. Parker proved to be a natural father, patient and gentle, and Diana's heart swelled every time she watched him with their son. Diana returned to teaching when Peter was 6 months old, bringing him with her to school on days when Parker was especially busy with the ranch. Her students adored the baby, and the older girls would help care for him during recess, giving Diana a much-needed break. The years passed in a happy blur. Peter grew into a bright, active little boy who adored horses and followed his father everywhere around the ranch. In 1872, Diana gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, and 2 years after that, another son they named Matthew. The house that had once seemed so spacious suddenly felt full to bursting with life and love. Parker expanded the ranch, buying adjacent property and increasing his herds. His reputation as a horse breeder grew, and people came from as far away as San Francisco to buy his stock. He hired more help, building a small bunkhouse for the ranch hands, and became not just a successful rancher, but a respected member of the community. Diana continued teaching, though she cut back her hours to spend more time with the children. She loved her work and her students, but she loved her family more, and finding the right balance was important to her. Parker supported every decision she made, and they worked together as true partners in every aspect of their lives. As their children grew, Diana and Parker made sure to tell them the story of how they met, about the blizzard and the broken wagon wheel, and the cowboy who appeared like a ghost to save their mother's life. The children never tired of hearing it, and Peter especially loved the dramatic parts, always begging for more details about the storm and the heroic repair. "It is like a fairy tale," Rose said one evening when she was about 7, curled up on Diana's lap, while Parker told the story yet again. "It feels like one sometimes," Diana agreed, meeting Parker's eyes over their daughter's head. "Like, I dreamed the whole thing and woke up in this wonderful life." "It was real," Parker said softly. "Every bit of it. The best day of my life, even though at the time I had no idea how much that storm was going to change everything." As the years turned into decades, Diana and Parker built a life that exceeded their wildest dreams. The ranch prospered, becoming one of the most successful in the county. Their children grew up strong and healthy, all three of them inheriting their parents' best qualities. Peter became a skilled horseman like his father, eventually taking over much of the ranch operation. Rose, bright and curious, became a teacher like her mother, opening a small school on the ranch for local children. Matthew, the youngest, had a gift for business and managed the financial side of the ranch, expanding their operations into new markets. Diana eventually retired from teaching, though she continued to tutor students privately and remained active in the Santa Rosa educational community. Parker slowed down as well, though he never fully retired, still working with the horses he loved and teaching his grandchildren the skills he had learned over a lifetime. They celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary surrounded by family and friends in the same yard where they had held their wedding reception. It was a warm May evening, and as Diana and Parker danced together under the stars, she was transported back to that first dance as husband and wife. "What are you thinking?" Parker asked, pulling her closer. "That I am the luckiest woman alive," Diana replied. "That of all the places my wagon wheel could have broken, all the storms I could have been caught in, fate or providence or pure chance brought me to exactly the right place at exactly the right time to meet you." "I was thinking the same thing," Parker said, "about how one decision to push through the storm instead of stopping earlier changed everything. If I had stopped at the way station like I originally planned, I never would have heard your horse, never would have found you. Our entire life together hinged on that one choice." "Then I am grateful you made it," Diana said. "I am grateful for the storm and the broken wheel, and every moment of fear and cold because it led me to you." They kissed, and around them their children and grandchildren applauded, but Diana barely heard them. She was lost in the moment, in the love that had sustained them through 25 years of marriage, and she knew with certainty it would sustain them through whatever years remained. And it did. Parker and Diana grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They watched their children marry and have children of their own, expanding the family until the ranch house could barely contain everyone at holiday gatherings. They faced losses together, burying friends, and eventually Diana's father, supporting each other through grief as they had supported each other through joy. On their 50th wedding anniversary in 1918, the family threw them a grand celebration. All three of their children were there with their spouses and children, along with what seemed like half of Santa Rosa. Diana and Parker sat together on the porch they had sat on countless times over the years, watching the festivities and marveling at the life they had built. 50 years, Diana said wonderingly. "It seems impossible that it has been so long, and yet it also feels like no time at all." "Every year better than the last," Parker replied, his hair white now, but his eyes still that striking gray blue that had captivated her from the first moment. His hand found hers automatically, their fingers intertwining with the ease of 5 decades of practice. "Do you have any regrets, my love?" Diana considered the question seriously, as she considered everything Parker asked her. "Not a single one." Oh, there were hard times, moments of fear and worry and pain. But I would not change any of it because it all led to this, to us, to this beautiful life we built together. "I feel the same," Parker said. "From that first moment in the blizzard, you have been my guiding star, Diana. You gave me a reason to stop drifting and build something real. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose beyond my own survival. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Diana corrected gently. "That is what makes it perfect." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as their grandchildren played in the yard where their own children had once played, where they themselves had danced at their wedding reception half a century before. The sun set in a blaze of color, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold and pink, and Diana thought about how many sunsets she and Parker had watched together from this very spot. "Tell me again," she said suddenly, "about the night we met. I want to hear it in your words." Parker smiled, understanding immediately what she needed. "I was riding through the worst blizzard I had ever seen, wondering if I had made a terrible mistake trying to reach the line shack. I could barely see, could barely feel my hands on the reins, and I was starting to think I might not make it. Then I heard something, a sound that cut through the wind. It was your horse, whinnying in distress. I almost rode past, telling myself I was imagining things, but something made me turn toward the sound. He paused, and Diana saw him transported back to that night, seeing it all again with perfect clarity. And there you were, this beautiful woman in a broken wagon, freezing to death but refusing to give up. Your eyes met mine, and I swear my heart stopped. I had never believed in fate or destiny, but in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that I had been meant to find you, that every choice I had made in my life had led me to that exact place at that exact time. You looked at me like I was your salvation, but Diana, you were mine. You were the miracle I did not know I was looking for. Diana felt tears slip down her cheeks, as moved by his words now as she had been by his actions that night over 50 years ago. You saved my life, and you saved mine, Parker replied, leaning over to kiss her forehead. Every single day since then, you have saved me in 1,000 small ways. You made me a better man, Diana. You made me the man I always wanted to be, but did not know how to become on my own. Peter approached the porch, his own hair graying now, his 3 children and 2 grandchildren in tow. Mother, Father, we are about to cut the cake. Will you come down? Parker stood and offered his hand to Diana, helping her to her feet with the same gentle courtesy he had shown her for 50 years. Together they walked down to join their family, their hands clasped, their steps slower than they once had been, but still sure and steady. The cake was enormous, white frosting decorated with golden roses, and as Diana and Parker cut the first slice together, their hands joined on the knife, she looked around at all the faces watching them with love and affection. This life, this family, this love. It had all grown from that one night in the storm, from a broken wagon wheel and a cowboy who appeared like a ghost to fix it. The party continued late into the night, with music and dancing and stories. Diana danced with each of her children and many of her grandchildren, but it was the final dance of the evening with Parker that she treasured most. They moved slowly together, his arm around her waist, her head resting against his shoulder, and the years fell away until they were young again, full of hope and dreams and infinite possibility. I love you, Diana Garrett, Parker whispered against her hair. More today than yesterday, less than tomorrow. I love you too, Parker Garrett, Diana replied. With all that I am, all that I have been, and all that I will be, forever. As they danced under the stars, in the yard of the ranch they had built together, surrounded by the family they had created, Diana thought about the terrified young woman she had been that night in the storm. That woman had been running from grief and loss, desperate for a fresh start, but uncertain if she would survive to see it. She could never have imagined the life waiting for her, the love that would change everything. She could never have known that the cowboy appearing out of the blizzard would become her husband, her partner, the father of her children, and the great love of her life. She could never have foreseen the decades of joy and laughter, challenges and triumphs, the deep contentment of a life well lived with someone who knew her better than she knew herself. But that was the nature of miracles, Diana supposed. They came when you least expected them, in forms you could never anticipate, and they changed everything in ways both small and profound. Her miracle had come on a cold December night in 1867, in the form of a tall cowboy with kind eyes who fixed her wagon wheel in a blizzard and, in doing so, mended her broken heart. Parker and Diana lived several more years together, watching their family continue to grow and thrive. When Parker passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1922, at the age of 82, with Diana holding his hand, the entire town of Santa Rosa mourned the loss of one of its most respected citizens. Diana grieved deeply, but found comfort in their children and grandchildren, and in the knowledge that she had been blessed with a love most people only dreamed of. Diana followed Parker 3 years later, on a spring morning very much like the one on which they had married. She was sitting on the porch of the ranch house, looking out over the land they had built together, when she simply closed her eyes and slipped away, a peaceful smile on her face. Her children found her there, and though they wept, they knew their mother had gone to join the man she had loved for over half a century. They buried Diana next to Parker in the Santa Rosa Cemetery, under an oak tree with a view of the hills. The headstone was simple, bearing both their names and the dates of their births and deaths, along with an inscription that Peter had chosen. 2 souls joined by a storm, united by love, together for eternity. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through generations, and the story of how Diana and Parker met became a cherished family legend, told to each new generation of children. It was a story about courage and fate, about second chances and the unexpected ways love can find us. It was a story about a woman brave enough to start over, and a man good enough to help her build something beautiful. But most of all, it was a story about a wagon wheel that broke in a blizzard, and a cowboy who appeared like a ghost and fixed it in the storm, and how that single moment of crisis and salvation became the foundation of a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. It was a reminder that even in our darkest moments, when all seems lost, miracles can still happen, and that sometimes the very thing that seems like a disaster is actually the greatest blessing in disguise. The story lived on, generation after generation, a testament to the enduring power of love and the mysterious ways fate works in our lives. And somewhere, beyond the veil between this world and the next, Diana and Parker danced together still, forever young, forever in love, joined by a storm and united for all eternity.